Welcome to the Brain People Podcast, a show where four mental health experts team up to bring you practical tools for overcoming mental health challenges. The Brain People don't replace your doctor or therapist, but we will give you some extra tools to help you on your journey. So join us as we fight mental illness, one episode at a time.
Have you ever been bored? Hopefully you're not bored as you're listening to this episode, because we're going to be talking about boredom, but not probably as you might think we will. We're going to be talking about the benefits of boredom. So my name is Dr. Katie Crews. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, your host for today, and I'm joined by my friend and colleague,
Amanda Anguish, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist.
And this episode is inspired by your own boredom, right?
I would like to be bored more often, especially after learning the benefits of it. But more actually, I think I've been inspired because, we like to talk about things that we talk about in our therapy sessions, things that come up. And I've noticed not only have I seen this in life, just people seemingly, what do they do when they're bored? But also just hearing people talk about, clients talk about, how many different extracurricular activities their kids are involved in. Or, what do I do when my kids say they're bored? That's probably a pretty popular one. I'm bored,
And we think it's a problem, and so we fill it with more things.
Honestly, we talk about beliefs. We automatically assume, I have to hurry up and fix this because we assume it's a problem. And I really wanted to dive in a little bit deeper and ask the question, which I like to do with a lot of things, is this really a problem? And if it is a problem, or if it isn't a problem, then maybe I should be addressing it differently.
And I don't know if you're going to talk about this, but my mind goes to the type of society that we live in today, and just being overly stimulated, overly busy, and not just busy with work, but also busy with entertainment in a way that, we're kind of treating boredom as if it's this illness or something a flu that we have to get rid of. And what if it's not?
Yeah, I used to work in a very low socioeconomic situation, and I would notice that the people that I was working with, which they weren't making a lot of money in their roles, they would tell me, every weekend, I'm taking, my 2- and 3-year-old to Disney on Ice. And I'm thinking, that sounds expensive to do this like every weekend. Or, I've got my kid in, and this is other people, not just the people I worked with, but I've got my kids in like 3 or 4 extracurricular activities. And I'm thinking, wow, how do you manage all of your kids in all of those different extracurricular activities? Because are you ever home and they're not eating dinner together, as they're constantly on the road, and couples are having to split to go to their kids' games and practices and things like that? And I thought, this doesn't sound sustainable. Like, how are we actually operating at this capacity because we're afraid of being bored, or we're afraid that our kids might be bored?
Yeah, I think that's a big component, like that fear of being bored and being left with ourselves without any distraction.
Mm-hmm. And maybe some people will be able to relate with this, but I've lived, many number of years before smartphones and the internet and all of this sort of thing. So I remember a childhood where I didn't have these things, and I was in fact bored a lot of the time. And so I've started to just pay attention, and I wonder if, some of the parents that might even be my age or slightly younger are actually not remembering those days too, and what we used to do before we had all of these things to distract us and entertain us.
I was watching a video recently, and you're talking about parents and kids, and how kids have all this anxiety and so forth. And they're like, what do you think is a big contributing factor? And I was expecting them to say phones, right? Media. And they actually highlighted that they were having too many extracurricular activities, causing a lot of pressure, but also not allowing for kids to then have that space of boredom. I guess they didn't use that word, but for creativity and for connection and for other things. And I was like, wow, one day if I'm a parent, like I want to be intentional to not just fill the time, and also we're kind of in a society that's pushing for productivity and success, but we're lacking in these other areas that are really important. And really, they showed in that video, they're talking about how it actually doesn't, there's no better outcome. There's no change in the outcome for success later on, whether the kids played outside or did these extracurricular activities. And I was like, wow, right? You would think that, cello and piano and all these things would be more beneficial than playing. But there's something even beneficial for playing and boredom that we don't recognize.
Yeah, we might have read a similar article because I read one, and I was even talking with Dr. Binus at one point about how even sometimes these extracurricular activities, if they're doing more and more and more of them, like even other practices that they're doing outside of even the extracurricular activity to get better at that, it actually sets them up to be even worse sometimes in sports because they don't care about the big game anymore because they're in so many different games that it's like no big deal if this one. So even in professional sports, if they get onto that place, that it's not even a big deal anymore to them. So, but I wanted to highlight a study that came out in 2013 that talked about especially small doses of boredom are actually beneficial when it comes to academic, but specifically creative thinking. And they use the term convergent thinking. So what is convergent thinking? So if we talk about divergent thinking, that's being open to a lot of different possibilities, like just that could be like a brainstorming session or something like that. That would be what we would consider divergent thinking. But convergent thinking is similar to that, but opposite as well. And that is that we're taking a lot of ideas and boiling them down to one solid solution. So a lot of our problem solving is actually helped by having small doses of boredom. So, well, what does that look like if that were to play out? So how convergent thinking works is you're looking at all of the possible solutions that you might have, but then as you take each one of those possible solutions, you start looking at, okay, what are the pros and the cons of each of these solutions? And then you imagine like played out, how would that look? And then based off of that, you can find like, okay, this is the one that's probably going to make the most sense. Therefore, this is what I want to do. And I started thinking about that a little bit more. And I thought, where is one of my favorite places to do convergent thinking? In the car. I don't even realize I'm doing it. I mean, I do know I'm doing it, but I didn't realize in the topic of boredom, like what I was actually doing. But what happens during the day? I have lots of problems that come up. And if I'm alone in the car and I don't have the radio on, what am I doing? I'm problem solving, and I don't even really think about it as problem solving. But by the time I get home, maybe a 20-minute drive, some things I know, oh yeah, I want to talk to this person. I want to have this conversation, or, oh, I want to write this down in my notebook with all my ideas of things that I want to do because I'm going to whittle it down to this thing. Or I have a presentation I'm working on. This is where I want to go with that. All of that happens in a very boring setting of just driving from one place to the other. And it's interesting because it's actually in the mundane moments where our brains are already like, I know how to get there. I don't need to think about it. I just go. That's where the most creativity happens, is when we're doing mundane things or when we're completely bored.
And that reminds me of how so many of my clients say, I hit the bed and all these ideas and problems, the brain is bored enough, right? That could be beneficial, but just not that time, right? So creating boredom in some ways, carving that out in ways that could allow the brain to have this convergent thinking.
Absolutely. I wanted to mention, even when it comes to scheduling, a lot of times when I'm talking with people they think a schedule is to be filled. I have to, from the time I wake up in the morning to the time I go to bed, I have to be so productive with my time that they start to forget even, well, what about the transition time? You might start work at this time and end work at this time, but did you consider like how long it takes you to drive there? Oh, do you consider how long you need to go to the bathroom throughout the day, like to stop to take a water break or those types of things? And people go, oh, no wonder I'm so stressed out, because they don't think of transition and even mundane moments as being needed in their schedule. But also, too, is, have I scheduled mundane or boring downtime, we might call it, into our schedule? It is a need. We have to process things. Like you said, if we go to bed at night and we haven't spent that time, the brain goes, oh, good, you're going to listen to me now because I've got all kinds of ideas. They've just been shut out because you've been, watching something, listening to something, talking about something, and you never had that downtime to just be in the moment to process things.
What's crazy about that, Amanda, there's a great book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, that even those transition periods where it might be driving, it might be you're on the toilet, we have even then distracted ourselves and not given our brains those time to wander. So the book highlights like wandering is really important, but now we have podcasts. Oh, well, not this one going on in the car. Well, sometimes, yeah, you can turn it off, or you're on the toilet looking at your phone, right? Just all these other moments that our brain could have reprieve and have, because reprieve really does help with that creativity that you were mentioning.
Yeah. Sitting in a waiting room. What's the first thing that we do? We go straight to our phones. What's the first thing we do? Like I said, when we get in the car, we turn on the radio rather than appreciating that as downtime, boredom time, whatever you want to call it. And then I think that's one of the reasons why when our kids say, I'm bored, we go, oh no, I have to fix this. Mm-hmm. Whereas, I was even challenged hearing somebody say, well, you're bored. What do you want to do with that now? Instead of saying, oh, here's 15 different things, like pick something, hurry up, giving them the option of saying or doing, what do you want to do with this time? You could sit. Kids are great at that when they're little. You'll see little kids just like daydreaming or thinking up stuff or singing. I love hearing little kids like just mumbling music that they've heard. They don't know all the words.
Ready to forward.
All kinds of things that they come up with. And there's even research, I don't know if I've mentioned this in a previous podcast, that I think it was a Scandinavian study that they did, that every single child up until the age of 4 years old is considered genius status. Well, what changes that? They get involved in media, they go to school and take on other kids' ideas about things. There's that peer pressure and groupthink that's involved. But what do kids do before that? They're not in school. They're sitting around doing all kinds of things.
And that also reminds me of the research that shows having too many toys for kids is actually inhibiting that genius or not allowing for them to have that creativity, that boredom, which is kind of like our body's way of saying, yeah, we want to do something, but what do we do with that boredom?
Yeah. And so giving even a child a complete thing to do, I'd say complete, like it's already been planned out. They're just consuming it versus say, hey, there's some sticks outside. What do you think you could do with those? Like giving them the opportunity to be creative with their boredom. Or here's a cardboard box. Like what could you make out of that? And giving them the opportunity to use that creativity and that boredom to come up with something versus already having the whole activity planned for them. And then they just sit back and wait for the next time they're bored. What are you going to do for me?
Exactly. So we're emphasizing a lot of the benefit of creativity, right? So to summarize all that we're saying is boredom can really allow the brain to be creative.
Yeah. And there is a dark side to boredom too. I love it whenever I share something with my clients and they go, but what about this? And so there is a dark side to boredom. And that is, sometimes your kids will say they're bored because they actually want to spend time with you. So it's kind of a universal phrase to say, I don't know what to do. That could be one option. I don't like this feeling of sitting here. But it could also be, I'm lonely and I want you to play with me, or I want you to do something with me. So we don't want to let our kids, from little all the way through teenager even, to not have us available. So it doesn't always mean that they're actually bored. Sometimes they say things and what they're really saying is, I want attention. So too much boredom can lead to finding unhealthy ways to cope with that. So we do want to have some direction as we help them in longer periods of time. Like, you don't want to leave your, 3-year-old alone for hours at a time, because they might get into trouble, especially if they're quiet. Something might be happening. But if you have a teenager that's in their room too long, you could go, oh, well, they're bored. Like, they'll figure something out. But do you like the things that they're figuring out to do with that time? Or would it be better use of time to spend time with them? And then the small bouts of boredom will be used more wisely.
So in everything, there's balance.
Yes, there's moderation for sure.
So any other benefits of boredom?
Yeah. So boredom can be an opportunity to motivate us. So, like, for instance, this kind of sounds bad, but say, for instance, if you're listening to somebody talk and it's a really boring talk, like,
Not you, Amanda, never.
Thank you so much. Neither you two. I'm going to share the compliment. But if somebody's boring, or maybe you have heard something before, that might be motivating to consider, well, how would I talk about this topic? Or what could I look at? Maybe that's a side note to the things that I'm hearing. So it could be motivating for sure. Boredom can also be, and we've talked about this a lot, a benefit is problem solving. I remember, I'll have to thank my mom in person for this, but I remember when I was working on homework sometimes when I was younger and I didn't understand something, and I would say to my mom, like, hey, can you help me with my homework? And my mom is very detail oriented and digs in and wants to do her research. So she'd have to read the whole chapter before she would help me. And I'm sitting there bored. And it would dawn on me, oh, I think I know the answer to this already. So the fact that she let me sit in frustration while she's trying to figure out all the information to help me, I would go, never mind, Mom, I think I figured it out already. So if you let your children sometimes be in that boredom of waiting, that can also, and for us too, even as adults, if we're bored, it could be a motivation for problem solving. But also, and I know we've talked about rest in some of our podcasts, and you might hear another one in the future, but it's also gives us a time for mental restoration. We don't have to always be consuming information all the time and taking in. I know in this day and age with podcasts, I'll hear people say, these are more on the extreme side. I listen to like 8 podcasts a day. I do it in the car. I'm playing them when I'm in the shower. I'm eating and listening to podcasts. And I even, fast forward them so I can get more in and more in. Well, does that give me any time to think and process some of the information I'm taking in? So having a break or some boredom, as some people might call it, others might call it downtime, it gives me an opportunity to restore mentally what I'm processing. I think one of my favorite things with boredom, I think adults appreciate boredom more than maybe you do as a kid, but just the opportunity to grow. It gives time for self-reflection. There have been times where I've heard my husband say something or somebody say something that at first it's like, oh, really? I don't like that. And then I reflect on it more. I'm like, well, actually I do that sometimes. And
chew on it.
It gives you time to chew. Yeah, perfect way of describing it. It gives you time to chew on it. Not the same as ruminate on it, but to really chew on it and go, actually, I do identify with that. Like, that does make sense. I do want to work on it. Maybe I need to do this to have a little more self-control, or I need to process it. But if we don't have that time, that boredom, then how are we ever going to grow from those things? And also, too, I think this is one of my favorite things for kids is boredom often in small doses, like we talked about. Boredom gives the opportunity to build self-worth too, or a sense of self-worth, because if I'm doing difficult things, I get to feel good about, I just accomplished that. I didn't like that moment, but I made it through it. And sometimes when we go to replace or fill in things all the time, then it builds the anxiety, it builds the frustration, because not only am I dealing with it, but I don't even know how to deal with it. So a sense of self-worth. So if a kid's doing something they hate doing, I hate doing this, Mom, you don't understand. This is so boring. And they get through it. Well, as they get older, they'll realize, hey, boring isn't the most difficult thing. I've done this many, many times. So it offers us a sense of the opportunity to learn duty, but also a sense of self-worth as well.
And, I was thinking more in adulthood, even for my own experience, sometimes I can catch myself when I'm feeling bored, wanting to do out of a sense of trying to gain a sense of self-worth, right? And it's like, no, I don't need to do right now to feel better about myself. That's, I think, a big component about like Sabbath rest or other things that are built into us, that we could be like, hey, I can just sit here and do nothing and build a sense of confidence in my value, my worth, which is, I think, sometimes why people don't want to be bored, is they can't sit with themselves because they don't think they're worthy enough unless they're productive.
Mm-hmm. And the irony with that is you are actually doing something in that moment. Yeah. You're sitting still. It's just how much value do you want to put on that versus being a maker of things, like having tangible things that you're doing versus internal things that you're doing. If I'm giving myself rest or boredom, if you want to call it that, I'm actually giving myself a place to rejuvenate. I'm giving myself an opportunity to think and process things that even my rest at night will be more productive too, because I don't have to take those into the sleep moments as well. And I think this is one of the reasons why so many people have trouble sleeping at night, because we don't give ourselves the opportunity to have moments of boredom throughout the day where we're not just making and producing, we're processing. So maybe that should be, a consideration. Is it processing or productivity that I'm really out for?
What's your goal even?
Yeah, what's my ultimate goal in this? So yeah, I think those are some things that are really good. So if you can practice, if it's with your kids, say, okay, what do you want to do with this time? Or what do you want to think about? Sometimes that sounds like the worst things when your parent says, I want you to go in your room and think about things. we all assume like, well, that must be really awful if they're saying it that way, but maybe we should give ourselves, that mantra too. Like, maybe I need to go in my room and think about things.
Now, you did miss one, and I'm surprised you missed this one, because I know that, you like to, I don't want to spoil it, so you could just say it.
Yeah, and the last one, I think, is, it's part of being a consumerist people, and I did allude to this earlier, but it saves us money too. We think we have to spend money sometimes to be productive, or we have to entertain ourselves by buying something. But some of my favorite things are the times when I'm like, hey, I need to make something, but what do I want to eat? Well, I don't feel like going out to buy something. So I sit there and I go, okay, what can I do with what I have? I'm not in a hurry. I'm doing some convergent thinking. I guess I'll make this. And so often we're so impulsive at filling the time that we forget, hey, I could be quite creative in my problem solving if I sit here for a moment.
That just made me think about COVID, right? And the shutdown and how creative people became. I mean, they were really creative before that, but it just came out, because I was thinking when you were talking about cooking and what to cook, I remember being in the kitchen. I'm like, okay, like I have more time now to cook. And it was probably the most creative I've been in the kitchen my whole entire life because I had the time and I was bored. And yeah,
people were driving places less, so they had that time on top of it too. Yeah, I think that was actually one of the awarenesses that I had during COVID is, wow, some people are taking this really, really hard because they're, having to have all this downtime or boredom. And other people are actually thriving, and they're that growth process that happened, like, wait, do we need to do this? We've just been going along and being busy. Maybe we do need to pull back and have more time because this is kind of nice to sit and read. And one of the things that we even did in the group home that I really appreciated for the kids, and I didn't even come up with this, was that the kids, when they came home from school, they had a half an hour of just like, they didn't do anything. We didn't make them do chores, which was one thing that we used to do early on when I was working there. They didn't even do their homework. It was just a half an hour to transition back into being at home from school. And I noticed a lot of the kids were, at first it was a little difficult when we first implemented it, but after a while, the kids got really good at just going to their room and being okay with no music, no television, no video games. They're just sitting there and looking through stuff or, looking out the window, staring, noticing things. And I noticed some like real growth that happened in maturity that happened.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. I think we covered all of it.
Yeah. So Amanda, let's just then end with, what practical steps can people take to become more bored or?
Yeah, to be more bored.
Yeah.
Your kids will love this. Just and maybe setting aside a half an hour or something a day just to start with. Maybe, turning off the radio when you get in the car. I know that happened to me automatically when my radio died once. I was like, okay, let's see how this goes. And, at first I started calling people to fill the time. And then afterwards I thought, I don't have to call people. I can just literally sit here and think and process. And I can't remember all the things I came up with during that time, but it did feel quite nice to not have to fill the time necessarily. Schedule in, if you have a schedule, set aside time to just maybe sit outside and just breathe in the air, notice the things around you, but not that you have to check them off, but just to really just enjoy being present with what's happening. And, if you have a family too, maybe take one thing out of your schedule. If it feels really full, like you don't have time to process and you're just kind of wound up all the time, take a few things out that you realize aren't necessary. I remember I was teaching a psychology class and I got to the point where I was like, I feel tense all the time. And as much as I love teaching the class, I took it out of my schedule because I thought, I don't want to not have time to just sit. And it's okay. You don't have to explain that to people. You don't have to say, oh, I don't really have anything to do, but I just want to sit. You can say, I have something to do. I have something to do and not as sit.
And not to do. To do, not to do.
Yeah, I've scheduled in not doing something.
Yeah, I like that. So just encouraging people to sprinkle in some boredom in small ways. Doesn't have to be like, I liked how you use the word micro doses, right? Just like some boredom here and there. And then these benefits will be theirs.
Yeah. And if you have little kids, if you teach them early on, they'll get used to knowing what to do when they're bored.
All right. Well, thank you, Amanda, for sharing. This wasn't boring for me. But it is encouraging, right? Even for my own self to always think back, to my schedule and think of ways that I can be intentional about being bored. And that's okay. And even beyond okay, that's very beneficial.
We need it.
We need it, right? So if you only take one thing away from today's show, remember this. If mental illness is a whole person problem, then it must have a whole person solution. I'm Dr. Katie Crews.
And I'm Amanda Anguish, and you've been listening to
The Brain People Podcast. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe. Your engagement will help us reach more people who need encouragement. To hear more episodes, learn about our other mental health resources, or support us financially, visit thebrainpeoplepodcast.com.